Good afternoon. I'm honored to have been asked to come up and speak today about my family, our daughter Gracie, and our experience with congenital CMV. Unfortunately, I'm probably not the best person from our family to be here speaking. My wife, Casey, is at home taking care of our 2 kids, Reagan, who's a little over 3, Gracie, who's now almost 19 months, and she's expecting our first boy in February. So she's at home resting, taking care of the kids. And I say unfortunately because she has become a real champion of CMV awareness and involved with Stop CMV. She is an ex-school teacher, now stay-at-home mother. She often goes into doctors' offices with many of the nurses, and some of the doctors ask if she is actually in the medical profession, because like many parents of kids with congenital CMV, she throws out big words like microcephaly and thrombocytopenia, and I'm always like, I don't know what she's talking about, but then she translates for me. So Labor Day weekend of 2008, we were coming home from vacation, and we found out that Casey was pregnant with our second child, and we looked at each other and said, there's no way this second pregnancy can be even close to as bad as the first one. My wife gave birth to our first daughter, Reagan, in 2007, and at about 20 weeks, she had a kidney stone. And if any of you have ever had a kidney stone, it's terrible. And then on top of that, she was pregnant. And then at 34 weeks, she was diagnosed with preeclampsia, and so we delivered our first child, Reagan, at 34 weeks. Luckily, very patriotic, she was born July 4th. And also, this is just a coincidence, her name is Reagan, so not related to Ronald Reagan, though. Just we like the name. So, and we couldn't have been more wrong about the second pregnancy. Everything was going great, and at about 18 weeks, we did the ultrasound, found out that we were having our second girl, but also saw an echogenic bowel in the 18-week. This is Reagan. Sorry, I'm not keeping up with my PowerPoint. So at the 18-week ultrasound, the echogenic bowel, of course, you sit down with the doctor and they say, you know, this is probably not that much, you know, don't go and look at on the internet and do your research, and that's the last thing that we were going to do. We went home and immediately, you know, did all the research we possibly could, and, you know, the odds were still very positive about, you know, it not being that much, and we were still very optimistic. And, you know, we agreed early on, we said, you know, we'll deal with whatever it is that is going on. And so 6 weeks passed, and at the 24-week ultrasound, Gracie, at the time, she was just our daughter, was growth restricted, and immediately Casey was sent to Yale New Haven. She was at Norwalk Hospital, Yale New Haven. They felt that more specialists, and so right to the hospital at 24 weeks. And my wife ended up staying in Yale for 6 weeks, and so that was tough, having a daughter at home. I work in New York City, going up to New Haven and seeing my wife, also trying to work and take care of our, at the time, 16-month-old daughter. It was wearing, but at the same time, you know, we were totally on the same page when it came to dealing with whatever it is that was facing us. And we decided a few days into her stay at Yale to do an amnio. We had decided not to earlier on because of just the small risk of a miscarriage, and we thought that knowing what was wrong was something that we thought we should do. And within about 5 or 6 hours, we found out that our baby girl was positive with congenital CMV, and we had some great doctors who did as much research as they could, even though they felt like they were flying blind a little bit because they really had not dealt with this. And at Yale New Haven Hospital, and they really had very little experience with congenital CMV. You had one doctor in a group of 15 that had experience. But so what the answer was to give Casey 2 IVIG CMV treatments, one at 24 weeks, and then she got the second one at I believe 29 weeks. I'm just not keeping up here. So this is a picture of Casey in the hospital taking a snapshot of the actual bottle. I know how expensive these are, so. So 30 weeks, Casey's ultrasound, she had only 2 out of 8, which led the doctors to say, okay, it's time to deliver Gracie. She was probably in the, from the ultrasound, 2 pounds to 2¼ pounds. So obviously we knew she was going to be very small, but you don't really understand until the baby comes out. And so at 30 weeks, my wife and I, unfortunately, was in New York and showed up just as it was over. So not great timing. But at the same time, our daughter was born on March 2nd of 2009, 2 pounds and a half of an ounce, very important half of an ounce. And she was 13½ inches long. And she proceeded to stay in the NICU at Yale for the next 6 weeks. Most of it was at Yale. She actually spent about a week closer to home in Norwalk. And so this was her. I'm not sure if it was day 1 or day 3. And I think the scariest time that we had was on Thursday. She was born on a Monday when a doctor said, I'm not sure if your daughter's going to make it through the night. Well, luckily she did. And she actually moved through the process in the NICU. I would say, 6 weeks is not quickly, but at the same time, she came home on her due date. So that was actually above my expectations. While she was in the NICU, she received a 6-week course of antiviral ganciclovir. We definitely feel that kick-started her recovery. Obviously, there are side effects, so she had to take the Neupogen to deal with her low white blood cell count. But we really felt that was a huge thing to help her start her recovery. So as I said, she came home on her due date, and while the last 19 or 18 months have been bumpy, she's actually doing amazing. This is her just about a week ago, sitting up on her own. She is profoundly deaf in both ears. She had her first cochlear implant in May. It was turned on a few weeks later, and we're scheduled to do the second cochlear implant in December. I think aside from her hearing, she, 2 big hurdles right now are just developmentally delayed. 19 months old, she was sitting up and playing on her own, but has no desire to crawl, but I think we'll get there. And also she has some respiratory issues, obviously being born at 30 weeks, but we think that we're getting to the bottom of that. It might not even be as much related to CMV as reflux. So we're optimistic about her development there as well. She was just, one of the reasons why my wife stayed at home was because she just had a feeding button put in. She's about 16 pounds now, and I think we'd like her to be over 20 for the winter so she can fight through the cold. So this is her during her implant, or not during the implant, but when they first turned it on. So we talked about being happy parents, so you know your daughter can hear when she's crying that way. So. And then she actually started to smile and said, wait, this isn't so bad. And then the greatest picture is in the upper left-hand corner, and he says, thank God this is over. And so this is more recently because of her, we think, reflux, not 100% sure. It could also just be small lungs, lung development. She has been in and out of the hospital a few times just to get some IV treatments and be on oxygen. We actually have oxygen at home, which makes our lives much easier, seeing as she gets a little cold, we can just turn it on at home as opposed to going to the hospital and having my wife have to stay over with her at the hospital. But it definitely has become less often over the last 6 months. So moving on to, as a parent of a child with congenital CMV and our experience dealing with Stop CMV and the overall community, is that we found an incredible group of people that knew as much or more than, well, I'm going to say my wife does, talking a different language than most people talk. All these words right here, I won't even pronounce any of them, you all recognize them. But it's amazing what the internet can do to bring a community together and how people find each other and can relate, and how much advice and help you can get through this network. Most importantly is Stop CMV, which my wife, as I said earlier, is the director of awareness. So. And the other thing that we were shocked about is just the numbers. 1 in 150 born with congenital CMV, and then 1 in 750 having permanent disabilities. before you get pregnant, you know, we did a normal trip to the OB, and they tell you about everything from toxoplasmosis to alcohol to caffeine and soda, but they don't tell you anything about CMV. And I consider myself to be a pretty educated person that asks a lot of questions. And the first thing when the doctors told me about CMV, I said, I've never ever heard of this. And then I mentioned this to lots of friends, and they just said, what is that? So, you know, I think that, you know, one of the main goals for my wife is to raise awareness. You know, obviously longer term, a vaccine, and just to, you know, to champion around this cause and getting, you know, everybody involved, parents, government, and the medical community. And that's us on Easter this past year. I guess that's it. So, just to conclude, you know, we really are enjoying watching Gracie grow, and, you know, of course, I don't want to leave out Reagan, who is also, you know, only 3, and she's participating in Gracie's growth, and she's really an incredible kid. Both my girls are amazing. You know, she's got this bright smile. You know, obviously with a congenital CMV baby that's 19 months old, you know, she's got a lot of development. We don't know what the future brings, but we're incredibly optimistic, and just, you know, continue to look forward to more of a milestone.